Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to get started. Hey, hi, everyone. My name is Selva. I'm going to be a moderator for today's session, and we'll get started with that. So glad to have all of you here attending this session on the IVR Reset and how Agentic AI is taking on in this world now. Over the last 12 to 18 months, we've seen how AI is actually had a rapid transition. So there were all the CX leaders were talking about should we be leveraging AI, and now we've seen how that has moved from should we be to we should be leveraging it, and this is how we should be doing it, or where should we be deploying AI, how should we be using it responsibly, and all of that. So that's a rapid transition that we've seen in the last 12 to 18 months, and that's going to be more of the topic that we're going to cover today, especially in the IVR and the voice world. And we've got some of the sharpest minds with us today to talk about this and walk us through on how exactly we deploy it, where are the best use cases to deploy it, how do we scale it responsibly, and all of that. Yeah. Before we get on with the session, just a few quick house rules. All participants are going to be muted. You can ask your questions through the chat window and we'll answer that as and when it comes in. And for those that are not covered, we'll do it at the end of the session. And we'll also be sharing a recording of the webinar post the session. So yeah, with that, we'll get into the speaker bios. Heather, all yours.
Great, thank you. I'm Heather Richards, Global Vice President of Product Strategy at Verint. I'm responsible for the conversational AI and agentic AI portfolio, and that includes our IVA as well as what we refer to as our Copilot bots. We've talked a little bit about that. I've been in the industry for 25 plus years, and before joining Verint, I was CEO at a company called Transversal. We did AI-powered knowledge management, which I think is becoming more and more relevant as we talk about conversational AI, agentic AI, IVR, etc. So great to be here. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks for joining, Heather. Really appreciate it.
And awesome. Hey, everyone. I'm Dan. I head up strategic tech partnerships here at Parloa. Was actually first hire and launched Parloa in the US almost 3 years ago now. So it's been a fascinating time seeing the agentic AI boom. And prior to that, I've spent the past decade building new innovative technologies. So I was also first hired another company where very different space, but Gartner eventually made a quadrant around it. And I think we're in the midst of something similar here where the whole agentic CX space is a new category and a new quadrant that's emerging. So it's been really exciting and looking forward to talking to everyone today.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, and I'll introduce myself, Bruce Eidsvik. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at Servion. Been here for about 18 months, but Servion was a partner of Genesis, where I spent a lot of time, almost 18 years, and really was always impressed with Servion and what we're doing. And I have to say, being in the systems integrator space right now has never been more exciting, because I don't think I've ever seen the rate of change faster than it is today. And having started an IVR company way back in 2000 odd, we promised all this great conversational AI functionality. I can say today it's really coming true. And even though last year, I'd say there was a few misstarts, if everybody's seen the Gartner sort of 95% of projects didn't go so well, I think we're going to see some super successful. And I know both Verint and Parloa have already had their, unweighted great share of successful results. But I think us as a business are really starting to understand what we need to have those successful outcomes. And of course, it starts with great tech. So I thought in that respect, I'd move a slide forward just to set the stage a little bit before our conversation. I really love this view. I'd say during my years at Genesis, and many of our customers were really trying to push, and at Servion as well, trying to move people to other channels, lower cost channels, meeting your customer where they are as well, from a service quality perspective. But in the end, and this is sort of being true through my career, is as much as we try to move people off voice, they keep on coming back. And it is very clear that trend is going to continue and probably get stronger. So that's why I think it's so important to have Verint and Parloa, with us today to talk about where this space is going. And of course, I'll add that the voice channel is the most useful to our clients, I believe, and it's also the hardest. The voice channel suffers no latency, and a voice conversation that goes wrong can really result in a bad outcome for our customers. So getting it right is still hard, and there's a lot of tech in there, a lot of things that we need to go right. But we are on, we are starting to deliver those outcomes in spades. I also wanted to say it's a very crowded space. This comes from our old CMO at Servion, Nicholas D. Kuszkowski, who I know very well, a great guy. And he maps this landscape for us. I would say at Servian, because it's so important, this technology to our clients, we put a big exercise together to really decipher this, I'll call it morass, and to come down with some real leaders in this space, to ensure to our clients that they get a great outcome. And I have to say that, we've been super impressed with Verint and Parloa. And I think what both companies are doing is fantastic. And I think as we go through this conversation, you'll see different ways that they solve the problem. And that's the purpose of today's conversation. So if you can move forward, I think we'll get into the meat of it. And maybe there's a lot of conversation today around two things. One is containment, and I won't prejudice with my views on this, but I'll be coming out. And then also, if I can say at the same time, so this outcome-based pricing, so because they're correlated. So maybe I'll kick it off with you, Dan.
Yeah, so I'll talk a little about containment as a whole. So I think, obviously with Agentic AI, you can contain a lot more, but I can also design an agent that contains everything and never lets it go to a human. That's not going to deliver a good customer experience. So I think you have to have a lens customer experience in with containment. And when it comes to outcome-based pricing, if you break it down, it's really a specific use case and how much you can contain. And that actually we found creates conflict between the vendor and the customer, because the vendor's incentive is to keep calls from going to a human, but the customer may want that to happen. And there may be really good reason in certain calls to do that. So for us, yes, containment is important, but not if it is completely sacrificing CX. And what we see is actually doing much more of like a consumption, actually cost per minute model, as landing much better with customers. Usually if a pricing model is too good to be true, there's usually a reason for it.
It usually is.
Yeah.
Heather, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with Dan, absolutely, particularly on where customers are going to see the value. And it's no longer just counting the number of interactions that, by one way or another, never reached a human agent. The definition that our customers are using of success are, to kind of multifaceted. Yes, there are some interactions you want to contain. Others, by design, you actually want escalated to a specific agent or the pool of subject matter experts, and so it's looking at the outcomes customers want, both from an ROI perspective, the speed of deployment, the number of use cases, the technology that IVA can achieve. But it's definitely not containment is king. That's not the number one criteria anymore.
That's cool. Yeah, I think we're all aligned on that. That's good and to hear. And I think it's good to set expectations with our clients that that's something they should be wary about and be considered about. And I also think just the chatbot, that experiences you've had on a website or through a 1-800 number, just not being able to get to an agent, it's really frustrating. One of the things this tech can do is sort of free up that time for the agent so that they, we don't have those long hold times, that the automation is taking care of them. But this also brings up another point, is around sort of hallucinations and how much you want to hand over to an agentic AI and the risk there with that. So Heather, what are your thoughts on that point?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think that the more that you're using things like, the LLMs to aid the conversational flow, there are obviously things like hallucinations that can get introduced. I think that the way that Verint approaches it is kind of multifaceted. And that first, you want to look at what the AI is allowed to say. And there are ways that you can put in guardrails through a combination of prompts, making sure that you're using approved sources as part of the RAG process, making sure that the information that your AI agent has access to is already approved knowledge. You can also then start layering on things such as in conversation, PII redaction. There's going to be things like PCI compliance on that data layer. And then as well as what you can do to see and I just test the quality of what's happening within the conversations of your AI agent subsequently. I mean, literally using the same quality processes that you'd be for your human agent. You want things like auditability. LLMs are fantastic, but black box AI, not much so when you're in a regulated industry. And so we actually see customers using and wanting to use a combination of more deterministic flows for specific things combined with the generative AI. And so that hybrid approach becomes really important.
That's interesting. That might contrast with you, Dan.
Yeah, so I think even if you put hallucinations to the side, it's all about instruction following, right? And everyone, when they see a demo of something agentic, they see a paragraph to prompt and it sounds great, and they get this heightened sense of confidence. Oh, I can just add 100 pages of instructions here, and then it's just going to keep working. The reality is, the more context that you put into the LLM, the harder it has to think, just like a human would, right? So what we've done is we've built quite a lot of features to not only test and make sure the prompts are good, we can also automatically detect, is there any part of the prompting that conflicts with each other, right? Like an average Parloa deployment has over 100 pages of instructions by the time we get to production. And if there's any parts that conflict with each other, you have to catch that. You also have to really test these things. So we have automated simulations and evaluations to test. Basically, we could take conversations that have actually happened in the contact center and simulate those through Parloa to make sure Parloa is actually following those instructions. It followed the right policies. It didn't go out of bounds. And setting up tons of things like multi-step, multitask agents, layering in deterministic flows, or even specific nodes of the agent that are like PCI compliant, for example, where it's that piece is deterministic and then it can break back out to an agentic flow. So it's, there's quite a lot of things you have to do to make sure it delivers. But if you do that, the experience can be amazing and you don't have any of the risks.
Hey, that just to follow on that, and then Heather, but do you find that iteration, like in terms of getting a good outcome, how important is that sort of iterative phase? That's a lot of people are interested in that.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most important things. So you have to pick the right use cases, but also you have to iterate and test like crazy. People may not realize you change one word or a part of a sentence in prompting, it can make a really big impact. So if you don't have that thought process going in and realize, okay, we're going to have to iterate tons of times to really find the right prompting, the right instructions and everything, and make sure that when you do go into production, it's going to follow the instructions as defined and there's not going to be any risk. I think a lot of companies out there that those projects you talked about, Bruce, where they didn't go well, I think they skipped that step. So like what you guys are going to talk about at the end of how you're approaching that, like all of that prep work and iteration is mission critical to these projects being successful.
That's cool. Yeah, that's really good advice. Heather, I presume you'd feel the same way. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. Because things have moved from, we're just going to throw AI at it. Yeah, as long as you have an LLM, you're good to go. And I think a lot of organizations we're talking to have already tried that approach. It doesn't work really, really well. It's the planning, it's the testing, it's the iterative nature of deployment that means that when you go live, you're going to get the outcomes that you expect. And customers now also expect tooling that you can use after something is live to change the behavior of something, to introduce additional flows, etc. Most of our customers do not have a big bang, go live, rip and replace. You can even augment the legacy IVR you've got with one or two single flows, front the entire tree with a natural language opening, and then use it to help triage what's there, and then iterate and introduce different automations and more complex automations as you go along. So there are a lot of different ways to iterate, but making sure that the tech you're using actually allows you to do so becomes really important.
Yeah, and then if you so a good project is one that's sort of progressive. You start with a few use cases, you deploy, Dan, as you say, you do your iterations to make sure that one's running, get that deployed, then add, instead of what we would have typically done historically is the whole thing at once. And you're right, Heather, you don't have to do that today. Sort of a good question too is like, and it'd be nice to hear from you. Like, I think of these agents as human agents. So once the agent's in their seat and working, that's great. But I talked a little bit of the maintenance aspect of that going forward, because you got to do retraining. Maybe talk to that a bit.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to do retraining. You may be introducing additional AI agents that you now want to orchestrate with the pool you already have over here.
Right.
It could be that your policies and procedures have changed, that you're introducing a new product line, that you've decided you want a different pool of intents within the conversation to be escalated to a specific place. So having the tooling there that's available for our customers to use to make those changes becomes really important. I mean, I was talking to a customer just the other week, and I think I mentioned this to you earlier, where they said 80% of the time that their team had spent previously trying to upgrade different flows within their IVR had been wiped out completely just by having the tool set there that allows them to take control of this hybrid workforce as and when they need to. And so I love it when you say, well, you've got your AI agents and your human agents. That absolutely. And then it becomes the organization's choice as to how and where they're going to deploy them. How do you turn those dials to either super automate some processes or dial it back when no, there's got to be a human in the loop for that one. And having that control becomes important as well.
Totally. Dan?
Yeah, so I think so. A bit of a funny story. When we originally launched the Parloa platform, we called it AMP. It stands for AI
Yeah.
Agent Management Platform, and we did that because the management of the agent is much more important than just being able to create one. Just like with humans, right? If you just throw a bunch of humans in a contact center, you don't manage them the right way, they're not going to be that effective. So we actually do whole like the end-to-end lifecycle management. So building, testing, evaluating, deploying, monitoring, improving, like a continuous life cycle. And if you aren't willing to do that, you're going to get the same results you'd get if you said you weren't willing to continually train and coach a human agent. Things change, requirements change, they learn. You have to be willing to make that investment. So I think that's something that customers need to be aware of, that yes, you can deliver amazing results at go live, but it's iterative and it can keep getting better. Like we're consistently seeing that even if we have amazing results, it keeps getting better, but you have to be willing to put in that work.
And the beauty, of course, is that once you get it right, it scales so fast. I think that's the big difference. And I was just thinking too, of course, there's a good, when we, from a Servion perspective, we think of Verint and we think of Parloa. The nice thing too is, Heather, what we loved is you guys have always led in workforce management and quality management. And so your ethos of thinking about agentic AI has that as the construct. So, and I know that, Parloa, there's some cooperation on that front too, which is great to see.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
It is that hybrid workforce, and I think we're really well known for workforce management. That workforce is changing, though. You have your humans, you have your bots, and a lot of the tools that you would traditionally use to manage that human workforce are just as applicable for your AI agent, if not more so in some cases.
That's cool. It's cool. Yeah, I think that's a really good, important takeaway, at least one out of this conversation, is you really have to think of this as obviously a synthetic human with a different job description, a different set of skills. But if you think of it that way, it's probably you're going to get better outcomes and I don't like conversational AI because it doesn't think about it that way. And one of the reasons I think a lot of these companies aren't they're more technology looking for a solution than solving, sort of a customer experience problem. So the other big topic these days too, which I'd love to get feedback on, is with respect to the business case. And, what are sort of the investment blockers you're seeing today? Again, maybe I'll start with you, Heather, because you're there.
Sure.
Yeah, talk to me about how important is the business case and how do you think of the business case?
Yeah, the business case is very important. As I was saying before, I think we've moved beyond the stage of AI for AI's sake. We went through a time where it was acceptable to just go away and experiment with a lot of different models, tools, et cetera. Most organizations have done that, and they may still have a whole department whose job it is to do that. But when you're deploying something, particularly whether it's, customer facing AI agents, etc., you've got to have a business case there. Our customers tend to put together an ROI that based on a few different things. One is expenditure of deployment. Are they going to have to rip and replace? That's going to factor into it, which is why that iterative start small scale becomes really attractive. The next thing is how many use cases can your IVA/AI agents actually address? So we're seeing more and more of the absolute requirement for one IVA to be able to do voice, to be able to do digital, social, as well as the co-pilot role. So an assistant to a human agent. And then finally that speed of deployment, which kind of goes to the rip and replace, but not always. They're looking for how quickly they're going to be able to recognize that ROI. And then that business case is reviewed sort of across the organization. You're no longer selling it to just the marketing department. You're going to have people with the titles, of chief operating officer, chief information officer. You're going to have the CTO there. You're going to have the head of, customer experience. And they're all going to be looking at that from slightly different angles.
We've been adopting a lot of AI ourselves in the delivery process. And what is it? And you sort of touched on it a little bit as well, like just porting an IVR call flow, a traditional call flow, onto an agentic AI platform. It is unbelievable the gains we're getting out of that. So not only the gains from what you produce as technology to automate the customer interaction, but the tools that we can use. And we're finding today that, we can bring the costs in such that you can look at a rollout and even an upgrade of a CCaaS in less than the OpEx that you're spending today. And, I haven't seen that for a long time. So those business cases are really, because of this technology, are really becoming interesting. And I think this is one of the reasons that decisions are being made faster, because hey, wow, like we really can, and we trust that we can get a good outcome from a technology perspective that the project will deliver. Dan, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think naturally the business cases are becoming more and more important. I think the most important thing that companies are looking for is something forecastable and predictable. So, right, anyone can just throw a big number on a slide and say, hey, you're going to save X. But it's about building that value roadmap of, hey, here's your quick wins, here's your midterm wins, here's your long-term wins, and being realistic with how you get there. I think the most important thing is, like, if you're very honest and it's a realistic plan and you're delivering against that, you get all of the support in the world from the top-down leadership. But if you start with the wrong use case, or you set the wrong expectations and you say, oh, in one day you're going to change the world, the execs lose faith in the whole business case really quick. So I think there's an art helping the internal champions and the people that are leading these projects project up to the senior management of, like, what is that value forecast? How did they get there? What are the bite-sized chunks that get them there? Because as long as that's being shared in the right way, everyone is happy and on board, and there's never any friction. But the friction comes when you promise A and then A doesn't come when you said it was going to come, right? So you have to really help not only deliver the business case, but help arm them with the upward communication to keep top down, bottom up, everybody aligned on where the value is coming from and how to get there.
Yeah, and I guess taking, like, look, the business cases are excellent. So this is a case where you don't have to overpromise, right? Why do it? So I think that's a really, is that one of your points? Just to be clear,
I think it's I think there's a ton of hype out there naturally. And that's part of why people jumped into projects really, really quick, which is some of those, ones that we've read in the news that didn't go so well.
Yep.
And I think right now, this goes into the pricing model discussion too, right? Like, it's people want something predictable and forecastable. And if you can deliver that, you get all the support in the world, right? So if you're going to promise value in a certain time frame, helping the customers make sure that it's really, like, doable. And some of that, it comes down to picking the right use cases to start with. Some execs may have their eye on this really high cost, super high complex use case, and that's great. You can get there, but you have to put points on the board. People get uneasy if you go too long into the game and there's no points on the board. So if you find those quick wins and you keep delivering, everybody is happy at all stages of the project.
I'll hand it over to you in a second there. I don't want to steal the microphone for too long, but that's absolutely right. Like, we have a client we're talking to right now, and one of the things that we want to do is like have the quick wins with the simple use cases so that you show confidence, but also to show where that roadmap could go with those, bigger, more complex, so maybe not start there, but show that that's the path. The glide path. I think that's a really good point. Heather, sorry, what's your perspective here?
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think it's absolutely okay to work with the organization on those aspirational use cases. But I completely agree with what's being said. You find the quick wins, and there always are. There always are. That there are always going to be things that you can automate quickly without a lot of pain, and then also start building more complex flows, more complex agentic agents, etc. As time goes on. I've also found when working with our customers that not every one of those use cases for automation present themselves at the very beginning. A lot of times, new opportunities introduce themselves after things have been deployed. So it's also about making sure there's that continuity, checking back in, checking to see what may have changed since you put together that original project plan, so that you're still delivering the best outcomes.
Hey, in that respect, can you share, like, in terms of use cases, is there any sort of perspective you have? And then I'll go to Dan on what are some of those low-hanging fruit use cases that you see that have high likelihood of success, and then maybe some of the more complex ones you're delivering. Same thing.
Sure. Yeah, and obviously it depends on kind of the vertical that you're working on. We work with a lot of customers in regulated industries, so with the banking, insurance, healthcare, etc. And a lot of the low-hanging fruit are those things that absolutely can be done in an automated way to service the customers with no need for it to reach the contact center. So everything from password reset, prescription reordering. It could be checking account balances. So sort of the stuff that we kind of take for granted, but there's no reason that those can't be automated. Yeah. And then you start working up towards things that you may want to be more agentic in nature, where the AI agent is not only going to answer a question, but understand and then act. And that could be going as far as making bookings or processing forms that have been filled in, etc. But inevitably there are going to be low-hanging fruit that you can automate straight off the bat without a lot of disruption. You can see quick wins. A lot of times that takes out a lot of the unnecessary interactions, and then you can start moving toward those ones that may need more nuance and may need to be a bot to a human handoff, a human to a bot handoff, a bot to another bot handoff. There are lots of different ways then that interactions can start being orchestrated intelligently.
Cool. And Dan?
Yeah, I think, it kind of just dumb it down a little bit. If you think about the traditional world of IVRs, they were very good at maybe automating something that was one question, one answer, or maybe two back and forths. When you think of use cases in terms of number of conversation turns needed, there's a perfect sweet spot when you get to like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 back and forths that were never dreamable in the traditional IVR world, which now with Agentic AI are super low hanging fruit. And then as you go, like if it's a use case that takes, if you go into complex insurance, end to end automating a claim, maybe 30 back and forths. But you might say, you know what, the pre-claim to just open a case is 5 questions. Like, tell me what happened, tell me when it happened, tell me where it happened, what's your policy number? Okay, I'm going to get you to the right policy expert, right? So there's also this world where you can do really, really low hanging fruit partial automation for super complex use cases where you get the menial work out of the way and then you get it to the right agent. It's a combination of all, right? So if you think about it in just how many back and forths does it usually take, that's a decent proxy of like, where's the lowest hanging fruit for AI that wasn't automatable before. With traditional IVRs.
That's important to think about. Like if you're thinking of just replacing your IVR with an agentic AI equivalent, that's a huge missed opportunity and probably not where you want to go further than that, right? You don't want to just start there. You could, but that wouldn't deliver the potential outcomes that could be delivered, is the way I put it, I guess.
Bruce, there's a question that's just come up. There's a question that's just come up.
Yeah.
So Dan might have answered that partially, but here's the question. What are the common use cases that require human handoff, and how do you ensure that it doesn't kill automation ROI?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think there's 2 reasons for it. I'll go first, then Heather, you can chime in.
Sure.
So I think first is simply just sheer complexity, right? I think there are use cases out there that take a ton of conversation. But there's this pre-phase, like that example I gave around insurance claims. You need to get maybe 5 to 10 questions answered to create a case and then figure out what agent to get it to. You can then get, like with Swiss Life, we did something like this where we're not doing the full end-to-end automation, we're doing a part of it, and then we're getting it to the right agent 96% of the time, and it was reducing the time that agents needed to be on the phone by 60%, because you're teeing everything up, you're getting it to the right agent, and then telling them, hey, this is exactly what you need to do. So first is just, if it's a really complicated use case, getting the pre-work done and handing it off with the right context can still have a huge business case. The second is use cases that there's a reason you'd rather it be done by a human. So for example, if it's a more sensitive type of conversation, whether it's in healthcare or life insurance, or it's related to very sensitive types of data, you may choose that that's the right use case to go to a human. But again, the same thing applies. If you can get context in the beginning and hand it off and arm the agents with what they need, and you eliminate, I mean, we haven't talked about it a ton on this call, but there's a lot of stuff that happens in the contact center where people are getting to an agent and then need to be transferred to another one, right? If you can that as an entirety, by figuring out better on the front end, who do they really need to get to? There's a whole business case there of just
absolutely.
That's pretty significant.
Yeah, that misrouted calls. I mean, that the whole story for me was about skills-based routing or intelligent routing, and that was all trying to get the call to the right agent with the right skill to handle that call. And it was, by the way, it's all deterministic, rules-based, and it was challenging. It did it, but this is gonna crush on that. Yeah, that's a really good point. Heather, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree on being the context. There is a whole business case that goes around first contact resolution, and the way that you're going to build that is if the history and context of whatever happened in that self-service channel can be passed then along to the agent, and that can be things that were implicitly gathered, information that you may already know just because you've identified who you're speaking to, so the customer hasn't even had to actually articulate those things, and all that can be passed on to the agent when you may choose to have that escalation. The agent to agent handoff, I think is really interesting. And one of the things that Verint has seen is, yes, that transfer from self to assisted service is really important, but if you can continue to preserve the history and context of the interaction between the customer and the agent, and then pass that off to the next agent, if necessary, that again is going to help and not cause those really frustrating experiences where you're having to repeat yourself over and over and over again.
Hey, this brings up another question for me, is around authentication on the front end too, and how you help with that process to make sure, fraud sort of aspects, right? Especially if you're in the insurance business. Any comments on that, and how do you deal with that, Heather?
Is that to Heather, me?
It's funny. I was looking at Heather, so whoever.
But I couldn't tell you were looking at me.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, no, I mean, when we're deploying an IVA, it can be integrated directly into the systems you're using to, identify the caller, and it can be done through, passwords. It can be done through, phone number recognition. We also have a product called call risk scoring that's actually taking behaviors into consideration in the lead up to how the customer actually even hit the IVR to begin with. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. I know right now that a lot of people are very suspect over things like voice matching and things like that. So what you want to do is start recognizing for patterns in the data itself, and then obviously, the normal authentication procedures, as opposed to just relying on things like voice printing and things like that.
Yeah, and having myself being in the voice biometrics and have team members that the same knowledge, gatekeeper, and there have been real significant improvements there. But yes, an area you definitely have to watch. Dan? Thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I think obviously you have the voice bio, which is very prevalent, like the financial services space. So we can integrate to the pin drops, Illumas of the world. You're always going to want to do multi-factor authentication. I think we're talking about the IVR, the inbound side. I think there's a whole nother thing that will happen.
Oh, yes.
a ton of automated AI outbound fraud that companies are going to need to deal with. They're starting, and this is the thing, like in the past, fraud calls are limited by how many humans could call and make fraud. Now there's infinite bound to that. So one thing we're also doing is it's a major like HSA provider. They're embedding Parloa a part of the authentication process where you get a push notification in their app, and then the people can use their face ID through like the iPhone. So you can, I think we're going to see, it may take a little while, but like, there's tons of different ways you can authenticate. We can text people a link to go and verify.
So like take this call for the following reasons. This is not a fraud call. Oh, that is really cool.
I think the short answer is however they're doing authentication today, keep doing it, right? But over time, companies may think of other ways to go about doing it as the market changes. Well, that's a theory I have. We'll see what happens. I don't know.
That's a really good point.
It's a theory.
Well, I think it's going to change as fast as everything else seems to be at this point. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
Hey, so we're getting close to time here. I think we said 45 minutes, right? So are we?
That's right.
Okay, so we're really close to time.
We've got a few more questions.
Oh, you got a few more questions? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what are the best practices for types of sources to feed AI learning? For example, if we have a warranty manual that's provided to homeowners, can we just feed that manual to train the AI for prompts?
Dan?
Yeah. So I think there's two ways to think about it. I think there's how do you train AI agents? That's one thing. And then how do you give them knowledge they can use? So, usually like knowledge articles, I wouldn't put that in the category of training, right? We would train the agent on like previous conversations and how conversations are handled, but you would actually use it like as a knowledge source, right? So some of our customers have thousands, tens of thousands, into millions of knowledge articles, and that you can either pump that directly into the platform, or we can tap into whatever knowledge base is being used to go and read these knowledge articles. Again, depending on the scale, changes the approach and the complexity. If you're approaching you have 100 knowledge articles or warranty manuals, I guess you could say, it's a different angle you have to take than if you have 1 million. But the short answer is like, that's how do you give agents knowledge, right? That they can tap into. So that's how I would think about it.
Heather?
Yeah, there's absolutely a difference between training the agents and the knowledge they have available. And I think I started off by saying in a previous life, I was, CEO of a knowledge management company. And for me, it's been really interesting to see how the focus has moved from, you need this tool to help you manage a curated database of knowledge, which, yes, that can be helpful, but actually to knowledge becoming foundational to delivering these agentic experiences that we're talking about. You could get an AI agent up and running in minutes if you point it to the knowledge repository that has the information it's going to need to answer questions about a specific subject. And so not only has it become a great way to get your AI agents up and running quickly, but it's also makes it a lot easier to either change their behaviors, augment their behaviors, give them additional information once they've been deployed. So kind of going back to the initial question, knowledge, from my point of view, has really become foundational to the way that a lot of these experiences can be delivered.
Anything back on that, Dan, or should we go to the next question, Salva?
No, let's go to I think Heather hit it. Next one's good.
Perfect. Thanks, Heather.
Next one is, where do you see the biggest gap today? The technology capability or the company's ability to structure the right value roadmap?
Very good. Excellent. Heather?
I'm going to say that you can find gaps in both. I don't think it's just one or the other. Yes, you need the right tech. There's a lot of tech out there, but it's got to be able to work with in probably an agile way on the roadmap that the company has in front of them. And I'll go back to the rip and replace. I mean, just because it's technically possible to rip out your entire IVR and replace it with 100% agentic, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be the desirable path to take when you're putting together your roadmap. So you need tech that's going to work. You need that, voice experience with low latency, all those things that we were talking about. But you want it to really complement the journey, the digital transformation journey that your customers on at the same time.
I think that's a really good point, and that's probably a point that escapes certainly a lot of people that I speak to, is that and certainly we've been counseling the same thing. It's like, no, that you can actually go agentic for the most part. So you can probably go agentic AI with what you have, right? And you may want to upgrade that environment in due course, but that's not a prerequisite anymore. So I think that's really useful feedback that people don't quite appreciate. Dan?
Yeah, I think it's a few things. I think getting the company aligned on what's the North Star of where they want to get to, and then how do they get there. So I think, like, yes, there's use cases, but I think also setting the right North Star. Like with some of our customers, the North Star is every one of their customers gets their own personal agent, meaning they called yesterday, they call back again today, it remembers them, like it knows. It's like a one-to-one relationship. Getting there is a journey, right? You're not going to magically overnight be able to do every use case and deliver that one-to-one relationship where Bruce and Selva and Heather and Dan all have their own bespoke, personalized experience through Agentic AI. But giving the roadmap of how to get there is everything, because the technology is not magic. There's limits to what Agentic AI can do.
Sure. Yeah.
You gotta get there over time.
Hey, that's a good point, Heather. I'll throw that back at you. Like North Stars, like what do you recommend as a North Star for clients?
Every client's going to have their own North Star. I think it goes back to what we were talking about before in terms of getting that balance right for the right situation, in terms of what's going to be agentic, what's going to need a human in the loop. For me, the North Star is delivering the customer's expectation over what they can automate, what they should automate, and what they shouldn't. It's not for me to go in and say, you know what, we're going to take 80% of this, throw a number out there and turn it into agentic agent. So I think that as well is part of the process. It's understanding the nature of the interactions you're having with your customers, the tech at your disposal, and then mapping out the goals that you're trying to achieve with a combination of both those things.
Very cool. Yeah, I 100% agree. I'll just say that a lot of people think 100% containment as the North Star. I feel like, I don't know if I love, yeah. But yes, I think yes, I like your answer a lot. Selva, anything else there? We're sort of at time, but
there's 3 or 4 other questions again, Bruce. But do we want to continue with the questions, or
look, we can go for it's sure. Let's take I want to answer the question. These are live questions, so I think it would be very useful to answer them. So we'll just maybe try and keep it a little bit tighter.
What does a successful IVR reset look like after 6 months with Agentic AI?
Okay, Dan?
So I think after taking 6 months, I think the perfect balance of containment and personalization and customer experience. So I think obviously the first thing people look at is, could we automate more? But you should also be looking at, can you make it more personal? Can you deliver a better experience? We've seen in that time frame us to be able to improve all of those. Like if you hit all 3 of those, better automation, better personalization, better experience, those 3 are be pretty big.
Goodness, so Dan and I are going to be in violent agreement, I think.
Me too, by the way. Me too.
It does come down to ultimately the balance, I think, of CX and the business optimization. And after 6 months, you'll be well on your way to getting there. It goes back to what we were saying before. You don't start off with that, but you're working towards it. So this whole idea of agentic is not just to solve all the problems with AI, but it's to create the best customer experience possible, as well as driving the operational efficiencies that your customers need.
I really feel we're in a perfect world here where we can really deliver an amazing ROI, right? And not at the expense of the customer experience, where I'll have to say in the old IVR days, there was definitely a trade-off.
Yeah, it's absolutely possible. It's just going into the project with that in mind, as opposed to where we started off, this notion of 100% containment for the win. It's that balance.
100%. Selva, any more? Or?
There's a few more.
While you're doing that, I'll sort of start a little bit of a closing here. Just to let you know that at Servion, we've sort of developed this kit, this offer, and I know Heather and Dan are aware of it, called the Discovery Plus Launchpad, right? And the purpose of that project, it's only 60 days, is to really sort of take what we spoke about today, distill it down for our clients that's specific to them, build that business case, build the requirements document so you can bring it forward. And then actually even deploy a couple of specific use cases so we can dream the dream. And I think it's a really sort of cost-effective way to figure out what you need to do and sort of look at the tech. Going to Heather's point about from a tech perspective, how do we fit this in? So I found it really, really helpful, and our clients are as well. And sometimes is actually resulting in sort of jumping over that. It's like, okay, we feel good enough, let's just go. So and I think that's acceptable as well to speed things up. Selva, do you want one last question? Maybe and then we'll let people go because we're almost in an hour here. So
do you see voice biometrics mainly reducing handle time, or does it actually unlock new conversational uses that weren't possible before?
Heather, do you want to take that?
Yeah, I mean, it can absolutely reduce handle time if you're able to, do any of the security and authentication upfront utilizing that technology. Absolutely. I've seen it also being used in use cases now to, once you recognize the person, automatically being able to personalize the interaction that they may be having with the AI agent. And so that you use it just as another piece of data, like you would knowing things from the CRM or anything else. So I think that's probably how else I'm seeing that used within a conversational AI journey.
I like that. Dan?
Yeah, I mean, pretty aligned there. I think ultimately consent or authenticating people is the gate to open up everything. Once you know who it is, you can then send the agents out to go and capture
100%.
all the information. So voice bio is a piece, but whatever other method there is to authenticate, you can now do much more with that. In the past, authentication was just used to kind of okay, we've authenticated them. Now the second you can gather everything on that customer and make it completely personalized. So it's that authentication importance kind of changes a little bit.
On that front, as you know, Dan, you and I have talked about this, what we're doing on the journey side and understanding those journeys and being able to package all that journey into a context map that we deliver to the agentic AI. So exactly what you said, I think that's going to be incredibly powerful, going forward. And then leveraging that information during that journey to pop in. So in some sense, understand that journey and saying maybe that journey, is an automated journey, but it's starting to go sideways, knowing when to pull that context out and deliver to a live agent. So, okay, final thoughts, and then we'll let everybody go. And Heather.
Final thoughts, goodness. I'm going to end with two things, actually. One is always keep in mind that balance between automation and CX, and I think that you're not going to go too far wrong. The second is, don't feel compelled about the necessity to rip everything out and start over. It's something that can be done iteratively in a lot of different ways. You can start now and scale. It maps directly onto the offer you were talking about from Survey and Bruce. So those would be the two things I want to underline.
Thanks a lot, Heather. Dan?
I think it's going to sound silly. I think let's have fun in the moment that we're in. Like, this is such a groundbreaking shift of what this can do for customer experience. And I think, there's all this pressure to deploy AI and it's noisy and all of that, but this is like such a cool moment in technology. You think about all of the years of
100%.
trying to crack this problem, and now we finally have the foundational stuff to make it possible. It's pretty damn cool.
I got it. That's it for me personally. I'm actually loving what I'm doing right now. It's never been more fun. Heather, I'm sure you feel the same way. I know you do, Dan.
Absolutely.
And Selva as well. But because look, I've been in this space for a long time. I founded an IVR company. And so I've been talking about this experience for a while, and honestly, not always delivering it. And so I do feel this tech today, we have the makings. And again, with a business case, it makes it easy to make a decision. Unlike before, these were big, long deployment cycles. So 100%, we should enjoy this moment. It's really fun times. Yeah. So in that, this was a lot of fun. I want to really thank both of you for joining Heather and Dan and Selva for organizing this. Really enjoyed it. And from all the questions we got, we'll answer those offline. We'll make sure we get answers to those questions. But really, really appreciate your time.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Ciao. Bye now.